Welcome to unit number 5 of our series, Finding God Through Faith and Reason. Once again, I remind you that this program is not only for our regular audience, but anyone to whom you think this connection between faith and reason would be valuable. Someone who might be struggling with their faith, or someone you might know who's a friend or family member who is doing a lot of questioning right now. This could be rather helpful. This will be made available on videotape at the end of the series, and there's also a book that I've written called New Proofs for the Existence of God. And in this particular series, we're still working on Chapter 2 of that book. And I also would have you make recourse to the Institute on Faith and Reason at Gonzaga University. Right now, we're concentrating on the metaphysical proof for God's existence, and in the last 2 units, we've seen 2 aspects of it. Number 1, we proved that at least one unconditioned reality has to exist, and after showing that, we showed that a circular argument could not work either, that there's no way of really escaping that at least one unconditioned reality, that is a reality that doesn't depend on anything else for its existence, must exist. And secondly, we were talking about the principle of simplicity. We're just trying to start to grapple with this notion of metaphysical simplicity. And we saw that 2 things were very important here. The first is that finites exclude, that boundaries of any kind exclude. So if you have the boundaries of square, it excludes the boundaries of circle. If you have the boundaries of acting like an electron, it excludes the boundaries of acting like a proton in the same respect at the same place and time. Finites, then, exclude. But we saw that there are other things in reality, oddly enough, that are simple, metaphysically simple. That is to say, they actually can, they're so simple that they don't have the excluding boundaries within them, either the extrinsic or the intrinsic excluding boundaries, so that they can actually hold together or be compatible with or be a unity for 2 opposed things. And we saw that, for example, in quantum theory, we saw that a particular electron or a photon, a light particle, could act both like a particle and like a wave. But of course, wave-like behavior and particle-like behavior exclude one another. You can't have a wavicle. So basically, how can you get both wave-like and particle-like behavior from the same entity? If that same entity, if that electron state, if that quantum superposition, as it were, if that is simpler than the boundaries of wave or the boundaries of particle. That is to say, if it doesn't have the intrinsic or extrinsic boundaries of wave or particle, it can actually give rise to both. And we saw, too, that you could also have electromagnetic fields, and they could hold together. They could actually unify. An electromagnetic field can unify both electrons and protons, which are opposed to one another in the same respect at the same place. But that unity, that field, can hold them together. And we can even see that keeps occurring. And we saw in the last unit, that, you could actually climb the great chain of being. That actually you might have waves and particle-like behaviors on the bottom of that chain of being. And then you could go up. And from there you could actually get not only wave and particle-like, you could actually have electron and proton-like behaviors linked together in the same reality, in the same electromagnetic field. And did you know you can even go further? Because there's space-time fields, too. And a space-time field, space-time, as we now know, is not just, an empty vacuum, but a real field that has dynamic properties, and it resembles a gravitational field. And gravity and electromagnetic fields, they interact together, and so we suspect there's such a thing as a unified field. And the unified field can actually bring together both the gravitational and electromagnetic fields. And so that unified field must be simpler still. And then going up the chain of being, we even have simpler realities. I mean, we could have a reality like a mentative field, that is to say, a mind-like field. And we know that mind can do some very interesting things. You can think, for example, of a square and circle, and you can hold them together in the same time, even though you can't put them together in the same respect at the same place and time. You can hold together in a single thought a square and a circle and a triangle and a trapezoid, and you can hold them all together, and you can compare them all with their different boundaries. Even though you can't combine them together at the same time, you can hold them together to observe their similarities and differences in a single thought. And that mentative property that enables us to kind of hold together different sets of boundaries in the same respect at the same place and time, that's a remarkable thing indeed. And then we get even to self-consciousness, which seems to be even simpler still. I mean, self-consciousness, that is a real weird one. Because if you think about it, you may not be just aware of the clock. You might be able to be, no, you are. You are not just aware of the clock. You're aware of being aware of the clock. In other words, you can get yourself. You can actually get yourself getting the clock. You can be aware of your awareness of the clock. Now tell me, how are you going to do that through algorithmically finite structures alone? How can you actually get yourself? Because that would mean that you'd almost have to, be traveling at an infinite velocity. You'd actually have to be traveling so fast, infinitely fast, as to be inside yourself. Oh, but you not only do that. No, you actually get yourself getting yourself. You can actually be aware of being aware of the clock. You could actually be aware of your self-awareness. You can capture yourself capturing yourself. Now, when you think about that, you better have some sort of an odd mentative property. And that mentative property then would have to, in some way, be able to capture and hold together all of these items. Now, you look at that aware of my awareness, and all of a sudden you say, gosh, that's very simple. That's very inclusive. Indeed, it has to be almost inclusive to itself. Now, let's just go further then. Further still. As you go up the chain of being, the one thing that you have to remember is you're leaving behind intrinsic and extrinsic boundaries. Every time you go up to a simpler reality, every time you get more inclusive, so that something can include itself, including itself, so that the unified field can hold together both the gravitational field and the electromagnetic field, you're always going to have to leave behind some boundaries, some intrinsic or extrinsic boundaries. And that is this profound metaphysical notion of simplicity, which St. Thomas Aquinas, when he talks about God being absolutely simple, that's what he means. Lacking all intrinsic and extrinsic boundaries. Now, let's return to our proof. We proved previously that there had to be at least one unconditioned reality. We proved that there had to be at least, in the set of all reality, one unconditioned reality. Now, let's just take a look for a moment and see what we're dealing with here. That unconditioned reality, there has to be at least one in all reality. Otherwise, I don't exist, you don't exist, nothing exists. So there better be at least one unconditioned reality. And what we've noticed up to this point is the unconditioned reality can't have anything in it that would exclude it from some conditioned reality.